We're here at Tate Modern, where Andy Warhol opens today, and I'm here with the assistant curator, Fintan.
Yes.
Thanks for showing and sharing this exceptional exhibition with us. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited when you got the memo, the email saying that you'd be working on this project?
Well, I think obviously maybe 10 times 10. I'm someone that grew up loving Andy Warhol, like maybe a number of other people. And it was very interesting to look at someone that seems very familiar and that people have a lot of associations with, and actually think about him in a different way.
Where do his inspirations come from? Where does he learn to paint and design like this?
Well, he studied pictorial design in Pittsburgh, which is where he's from, and he grew up doing art classes in the local museum, which were free. He comes from quite a working class background. His family were immigrants from eastern Slovakia, a tiny village in the Carpathian Mountains. And so he grew up being nurtured by his mother, who was very creative as well. And she actually lived with him for about 20 years in New York. So this whole period in the 60s where he's associated with parties, he comes home to his mother. And I think that's something that I think is sometimes ignored and actually connects to his interesting kind of everyday objects, which is what he first does with pop art, where he depicts a Campbell soup can. It's kind of connected to this kind of working class background where objects have a kind of renewed significance because they're associated with like an aspirational culture.
What does the room with the balloons mean?
They're called silver clouds. They're silver mylar pillows almost that float in the air, and he used it to signify his retirement from doing paintings. But he did actually continue to do paintings as commissioned portraits, but it's kind of a nice example of how he was really testing the boundaries of what art might be. So when he does silkscreen printing for his pop paintings, silkscreen printing was a commercial process. It had never been used in the realm of fine art. So even then he was kind of testing how you make a painting.
We're in the pop art room here right now. You go, actually even still in this room, there's some pretty like dark imagery from a slightly different time in his life when he's depicted America in a bit of a bleaker way, looking at death quite graphically. Yeah,
and death actually recurs a lot more than people think in his work. Even the Marilyn Monroe paintings, which are some of his most famous works, were created directly in response to her suicide. And so we really wanted to think about the pop period, not to think about the pop period just in relation to kind of commercial imagery, but also to think about the more serious subject matter that he explores by reproducing images of death and disaster and protest in paintings, which actually was quite unique at the time.
How did people at the time respond to that? Because if you went to an exhibition and you saw pictures like this and you're expecting colour, and then you saw an exhibition that was slightly bleaker, what did the general public think of that kind of turn in him?
I think people were kind of troubled by the imagery, and they're very often seen as being as kind of really succinctly summing up a lot of the turmoil that was going on in the 60s, where the 60s started with a kind of sense of optimism, and then as the 60s progresses with civil rights protests, with the death of JFK and Martin Luther King, there's a great deal of change, and Warhol somehow manages to capture that kind of spirit in his work, and I think people were unnerved by it.
He himself actually died very briefly. He was shot by someone that he'd worked with. They came into a studio and shot him. He was taken to hospital, pronounced kind of medically dead, but they managed to sort of revive him and bring him to life. And then after that, he's a different character. He's a lot more recluse and less open with his work and what he's doing in the studio.
I mean, he's kind of reclusive to an extent, but then by the time you get to 1978, he's going to Studio 54 with Liza Minnelli and Holston and Bianca Jagger. So there is still an interest in the world at large and interest in socializing. But I think the shooting did definitely affect him. It affected him just medically. He found it very difficult to swallow. He wore a kind of little corset for most of his life to help hold him upright. And it made it very difficult for him to kind of paint initially. But as time went on, he still continued to be interested in younger artists, younger creatives, and so you see that with his friendship with Basquiat or him kind of hanging out with Keith Haring.
One of the rooms is like a kind of rehearsal space. I think it's a Velvet Underground jam in a way. When does he get involved in music? How does he become aligned with bands like that?
Well, he actually had an interest in really experimental avant-garde music from his time in Pittsburgh when he was studying pictorial design, so kind of avant-garde composers like John Cage, and then when he moves to New York, he's very much part of this experimental community of experimental art makers. But with the Velvet Underground, his assistant Gerard Malanga, who's still alive, he brought the Velvet Underground to Warhol, and Warhol really loved how like raw and hardcore they were.
How do you feel about the show? It's open today. Many people have come to see it just today. What's your kind of feeling today?
I feel a sense of release and excitement that it's all come together. We work on exhibitions for around 4 years because it takes a while to research and to get the loans. So it's always very exciting when we finally see the real thing on the wall. And we're really also excited just to see the public come in, because it's only complete when the public enter the space. If there was no public, there'd be no point. So.
Vincent, thanks very much. Thanks for sharing this with us, and have a great rest of the show.
You too. Thank you.